The greatest risk isn't thinking too much, it's letting others think for you. What if I told you that the greatest danger facing humanity today isn't ignorance, not even deliberate evil, but rather a silent, sneaky kind of contamination, an invisible epidemic spreading through minds like a fog, turning brilliant men into unconscious accomplices of destruction? Sounds like an exaggeration. Then picture this: an award-winning scientist spreading lies with confidence, a respected teacher supporting messages of hate, a loving father putting his own children at risk, not out of cruelty, but because of something even more dangerous: stupidity. Not the kind of stupidity we laugh at in jokes, but a subtle, functional force able to turn rational beings into obedient puppets without them ever realizing the strings are being pulled. That was the reality witnessed by Dietrich Bonhoeffer, a Lutheran theologian imprisoned for conspiring against Hitler in Nazi Germany. He didn't see monsters crawling out of the shadows. He saw neighbors, colleagues, pastors, ordinary men and women becoming active instruments of evil, not out of wickedness, but from something far harder to fight: the surrender of consciousness. The most disturbing part: it's not happening over there or to someone else, it's happening here, now, to us. Bonhoeffer didn't describe an evil of the past, he uncovered a dynamic of the present, one that's still alive, relevant, wearing new clothes, changing its name, but keeping the same core, a theory so unsettling, so real, that understanding it could mean the difference between keeping your mental freedom or becoming just another replaceable part in the game of those who profit from your disconnection. When we hear the word stupidity, we think of someone intellectually limited, ignorant, or foolish, but that image is just a comfortable disguise. The kind of stupidity that threatens freedom doesn't shout, it whispers, it spreads like hidden source code within social systems. It's in the standardized behaviors, in the truths repeated without reflection, in the rules no one understands, but everyone follows, in the everyone does it, in the it's always been this way ... This stupidity isn't an individual flaw, it's a collective structure, a social virus. And the scariest part, it works. It serves a purpose. It guarantees order, stability, and above all, power. People who think too much, question too much, feel too deeply, are inconvenient. They slow the machine down. The system needs predictable parts, not restless souls. That's how the ideal citizen is shaped, whether under a democratic, authoritarian, or corporate regime. Someone who consumes votes, works, shares, but never crosses the allowed limits of their outrage. Someone who believes they're thinking, when in fact, they're just repeating bought opinions, programmed narratives, convictions implanted like viruses into the collective mind. The result, a crowd that thinks it's being critical, but is really just playing a role in a script they didn't write. A society where stupidity isn't the exception, it's the foundation, where those who try to break free are mocked, arrogant, a conspiracy theorist, too extreme. And that is where the real danger lives, when stupidity stops being seen as a flaw and becomes a virtue, when thinking becomes a threat and questioning an offense. This is how you manufacture an entire generation that knows everything except how to think for themselves. In 1943, from inside a Nazi prison cell, Dietrich Bonhoeffer wrote reflections that sound today like prophecies. Imprisoned for opposing Hitler's regime, he no longer saw evil as the greatest threat of his time. He saw something worse, something more efficient, more dangerous, precisely because it was accepted. Stupidity is a more dangerous enemy of the good than malice. He wrote, "We can protest against evil. It can be exposed. It can be prevented by force. But against stupidity, we are defenseless." These weren't exaggerated words. They were a diagnosis. Bonhoeffer watched doctors participate in inhumane experiments, teachers defending racist ideologies, ordinary citizens reporting their Jewish neighbors, not out of personal hatred, but because they believed they were doing the right thing. They didn't kill, they just believed in those who did. And the most terrifying part, they were proud of it, because within the logic of the time, they were seen as heroes. This is the kind of stupidity Bonhoeffer warned us about, not ignorance, but unconscious obedience, a moral surrender disguised as normality, the abandonment of judgment in exchange for the comfort of belonging. When obedience combines with a deactivated intellect, you get the perfect breeding ground for any form of totalitarianism, democratic or not, religious or not, progressive or conservative. And here lies the most delicate point in his theory. Stupidity doesn't come from a lack of intelligence. It comes from the decision not to think. It's a choice, often silent, to give up your own conscience in order to fit into the comfort of dominant narratives. A choice that turns even the brightest minds into useful tools for systems that feed on collective ignorance. That's why, before we point fingers at the so-called fools, maybe we should ask ourselves how many of our truths are truly ours, how many of our thoughts are genuine, and how many were planted while we were sleepwalking through life. Functional stupidity is still very much alive, and it's not just hiding in the extremes. It lives at the very center of what we call normal. What if I told you that the greatest danger facing humanity today isn't a lack of intelligence, but a silent, collective, and disturbingly functional mental contamination, an invisible force capable of turning brilliant minds into unknowing accomplices of their own destruction? Sound like an exaggeration? Then picture this: an award-winning scientist spreading lies, a beloved teacher defending hateful ideologies, a loving father putting his own children at risk, not out of cruelty, but out of stupidity. But not the kind of stupidity you're probably imagining. This isn't about simple ignorance. This is something far more subtle and far more devastating. Functional stupidity, the kind that hides behind virtue, that obeys, that believes, that doesn't question, the kind that plays along with the system and doesn't even realize it. This was the reality witnessed by Lutheran theologian Dietrich Bonhoeffer during the Nazi regime in Germany. He didn't see monsters. He saw neighbors, co-workers, religious leaders, ordinary people becoming tools of evil, not through cruelty, but through the abandonment of conscience. And the most disturbing part, it's not just happening to other people, it's happening to people like you, like me, right now. Bonhoeffer wrote a theory, bold, uncomfortable, prophetic, an idea so unsettling that once you truly grasp it, you'll never look at the world the same way again. According to him, stupidity isn't a cognitive failure, it's an ethical condition. It's when a person surrenders critical thinking in exchange for comfort, belonging, and security. It's when you stop thinking with your own head and start operating with someone else's. This theory wasn't born from academic abstractions. It came from a Nazi prison cell in 1943. Bonhoeffer saw, with his own eyes, professors defending Nazism, doctors conducting inhumane experiments, citizens turning in their neighbors, not out of personal hatred, but because they believed they were doing the right thing. They didn't kill, they simply believed in those who did, and they were proud of it. Bonhoeffer wrote, "Stupidity is a more dangerous enemy of the good than malice. We can protest against evil, we can expose it, we can prevent it with force, but against stupidity, we are defenseless." He understood that evil, when clear, can be resisted, but stupidity hides behind good intentions, prestigious titles, and rehearsed speeches. It presents itself as opinion, but it's really just obedience. It wears the mask of morality, but it's nothing more than convenience. And perhaps the most disturbing truth of all, functional stupidity isn't the exception. It's the structure. It's embedded in entire systems. It spreads through algorithms, school curricula, headlines, scripted speeches, and it feeds on conformity, on the fear of standing out. It doesn't even require ignorance. In fact, it often feeds on intelligence itself, because the more articulate someone is, the easier it is for them to defend an idea they never actually questioned. Today's stupidity speaks well, has degrees, gets likes, writes opinion pieces, but at its core, it just echoes. It doesn't think. And when the echo is loud enough, it convinces itself that it's the voice of reason. Bonhoeffer's theory points the finger not at others, but inward, at each one of us. Today, with advances in psychology and neuroscience, what Bonhoeffer intuited is now confirmed by science. Have you heard of the Dunning-Kruger effect? This phenomenon shows that the less someone knows about a topic, the more confident they tend to be. Ignorance doesn't create doubt, it creates certainty, and the incompetent, unable to recognize their limitations, becomes a fervent proselytizer. But it doesn't stop there. In the 1950s, psychologist Solomon Asch conducted a social conformity experiment, a simple visual test where the correct answer was obvious, but everyone around the participant was in on it, deliberately giving wrong answers. The result, more than 70% of participants preferred to be wrong with the group rather than right. Alone, Solomon wrote, the tendency to conform to the opinion of the group is so strong that many prefer to err with others rather than to be correct alone. The fear of seeming weird, of standing out, of being outside. It's this fear that anesthetizes thought, and this is the kind of stupidity Bonhoeffer feared, the one disguised as normality. Now add to that the confirmation bias, a cognitive flaw where people only see what confirms their beliefs and ignore everything else. The internet is the perfect playground for this bias. Algorithms show you what you want to hear. They feed your bubble. They reinforce your certainty. And when something challenges your worldview, the brain activates the same area that processes physical pain. In other words, thinking differently hurts, literally. That's why many prefer to repeat what they've already heard instead of facing the discomfort of reflection. Thinking is exhausting. It requires courage. It hurts, but it's also what keeps us free. Another crucial experiment is Stanley Milgram's. In 1961, Milgram wanted to understand how far an ordinary person would go obeying an authority figure. The results were shocking. 0.65% of participants administered potentially lethal electric shocks to another human being just because someone in a lab coat told them to. They sweated, hesitated, suffered, but they obeyed. Milgram concluded, the essence of obedience is seeing yourself as an instrument of another's will, and therefore not feeling responsible. And here's the core of Bonhoeffer's theory. Modern stupidity isn't a lack of intelligence, it's a lack of consciousness. It's acting without judgment, obeying without thinking, repeating without understanding. And when that becomes the norm, any atrocity can be justified with phrases like, I'm just following orders, or I'm just doing my job. Today, we no longer need totalitarian regimes. Stupidity has been industrialized. It has design, color, soundtrack, and real-time updates. It's delivered in your feed, in short videos and shallow headlines. It seduces, it entertains, it rewards, and above all, it profits. That the less you think, the more predictable you become. The more predictable, the more manipulable, and the more manipulable, the more profitable. That the machine of modern stupidity is efficient. It runs through education that teaches repetition, not questioning, through media that varies tone but not content, through a culture that turns disagreement into offense, through entertainment that trades depth for instant stimulus. We live in a time where yelling is easier than thinking, where having an opinion has become synonymous with awareness, where questioning is a crime, and thinking deeply is arrogance. Thinking has become a radical act. Yes, radical, because true thinking demands something few are willing to give: courage. Thinking is not just having an opinion, it's digging deep until opinions fall apart, where the solid ground of certainty gives way to harder, lonelier questions. That scares people. That comes at a cost. Those who truly think feel it. They feel the discomfort of being on the margins, not belonging to the comfortable consensus. They feel the pain of realizing the majority is wrong, and the silent fear that maybe they are, too. They feel the loneliness of not fitting into labels. Parties, HASHTAGS. Of having no organized cheering section, no easy applause. Thinking, nowadays, is a subversive act. It challenges the logic of the machine. It rejects the speed of the feed. It demands pause, silence, contemplation, everything the system despises, everything the market can't monetize, everything politics can't contain. That's why thinkers are quickly seen as threats, as arrogant, difficult, out of touch, because thinking dismantles narratives, and narratives are the fuel of organized stupidity. But there's something even more unsettling. Today, thinking isn't just hard, it's dangerous. Have you noticed how certain ideas can't even be mentioned? How some words trigger collective hysteria like alarms? How the rhetoric of goodness has become the new court, where there's no room for nuance, no room for context, no room for ambiguity. We're living in a time where the greatest heresy is thinking independently, where thought has become transgression, where the search for truth has been replaced by the pursuit of social validation. And the cost? You'll lose followers, you'll be misunderstood, maybe even cancelled. You'll feel lonelier, more restless, more uncomfortable. But you'll also be free, authentic, unbreakable. Because when you reclaim your ability to think for yourself, no one can control you anymore. Bonhoeffer, writing from prison, understood that. He knew thinking was dangerous, but he also knew something even more fatal. Not thinking is worse, and now, you know that too. The fact that you've made it this far already sets you apart from the average. This isn't easy content. It doesn't offer quick fixes. It doesn't hand you an external enemy to blame. It turns inward, to the only place where stupidity truly hides, the comfort zone of your own mind. Bonhoeffer didn't just leave us a warning, he gave us a choice. He showed us that stupidity doesn't need weapons. It only needs silence, repetition, unquestioned good intentions, good people who become tools of evil simply because they stopped thinking for themselves. So what's left for us? To resist, to think, to question, especially when it makes us unpopular. Today, rescuing thought is no longer a virtue, it's an act of survival, a gesture of lucid disobedience, because staying lucid, in these times, is the last free territory, in a world that has commodified everything, even your mind. So the final question isn't, did you understand Bonhoeffer's theory? The question is, are you willing to pay the price of staying lucid in a world that rewards stupidity? Because now you know, and knowing comes with a cost. But there's something far more dangerous than paying that cost. It's pretending you didn't hear this calling. It's going back to sleep. It's living under the illusion that you're still the one doing the thinking. Waking up hurts, but staying numb. That's the real danger.